It was one of those sun-drenched Saturdays in Southern California when the air smells faintly of sunscreen and fresh-cut grass, and the sounds of laughter, food trucks, and community chatter blend into the soundtrack of the day. A local park in East Los Angeles had transformed into the epicenter of neighborhood life. Families sprawled on picnic blankets, parents clutched iced coffees, and little brothers and sisters wove between the legs of grown-ups while oversized soccer balls rolled at their feet. At the far corner of the park sat a patchy but beloved soccer field, lined not by gleaming stadium lights or crisp advertising boards, but by leaning fences, makeshift benches, and the passion of kids who played like their lives depended on it. That afternoon, the field hosted the semi-final of a youth community tournament. The kids were no older than 13, but they carried themselves as if the eyes of the world were upon them. Soccer in America, still fighting for attention alongside football, basketball, and baseball, thrived here in its most genuine form, among immigrant families, dreamers, and kids who found freedom chasing a ball. On one side, wearing blue pennies, stood a team of scrappy players from Boyle Heights, all grit and hustle. On the other side, in red, stood a team led by a boy named Ethan. Ethan was the kind of kid everyone noticed immediately, tall for his age, with quick feet, sharper instincts, and a swagger that alternated between admirable confidence and unbearable arrogance. Coaches whispered he could go far if he learned to control his temper. His teammates respected his talent but often resented his attitude. When Ethan dribbled, he refused to pass. When he scored, he celebrated alone. And when something didn't go his way, he let the whole world know. That day was no exception. The match had been tight, 0-0, both sides battling with raw energy. Parents shouted encouragement from the sidelines, their voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus. Sweat glistened on the kids' foreheads, the late afternoon sun painting long shadows across the field. Ethan, as always, was the focal point. Every time he touched the ball, the crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Every time he lost it, the tension spiked. Midway through the second half, Ethan found himself sandwiched between two defenders. He fought hard, his legs pumping furiously, the ball trapped under heavy pressure. One of the defenders lunged, cleats colliding with Ethan's shin. Ethan crumpled, screaming for a foul, expecting the whistle to rescue him. But the referee, an overworked volunteer dad in a neon vest, shook his head and let play continue. The injustice hit Ethan like a match striking gasoline. He leapt to his feet, his face red, eyes blazing. The ball was gone, the chance evaporated, but his fury surged unchecked. He yanked his sneaker off, an oversized, scuffed Nike that had seen too many games, and hurled it with all the strength his 13-year-old body could summon. The sneaker cut through the air, a blur against the sky. For a heartbeat, the entire field seemed to freeze. The players stopped running, parents gasped, even the ball seemed to pause mid-roll. And then, with almost cinematic precision, the sneaker found its target. Not another player, not the referee, but a man sitting quietly on the sidelines, blending in so completely that no one had noticed him before. The sneaker smacked squarely into the man's face. A soft thud, a sharp intake of breath, and silence rippled through the crowd. Gasps erupted from the benches. "Oh my God," a mother shrieked. Kids froze, jaws slack, unsure if they should laugh or hide. Ethan's teammates stared at him in horror. And Ethan himself stood paralyzed, his fury instantly replaced by dread. The man who had been struck slowly lifted his head. He wasn't dressed in anything remarkable. Jeans, a plain t-shirt, a baseball cap pulled low. But when he removed the sneaker from his face and lowered his cap, the collective gasp of the crowd deepened into stunned recognition. It was David Beckham. The David Beckham. The global icon, the former England captain, the man whose free kicks had bent reality, whose face had graced billboards from Tokyo to Times Square, who now owned a Major League Soccer team in Miami. He was supposed to exist in glossy magazines, exclusive events, and professional stadiums, not in a dusty community park in East LA. And yet, here he was, sitting alone like any other parent, now with a sneaker mark on his cheek. Parents fumbled for their phones, snapping pictures, whispering furiously. Kids pointed wide-eyed. The referee froze, unsure whether to blow the whistle, apologize, or bow. Ethan's face drained of color. He hadn't just hit someone with his sneaker. He had hit Beckham. But Beckham did not shout. He did not stand up and unleash his celebrity power to humiliate a child. Instead, he touched the side of his face, chuckled softly under his breath, and looked at Ethan with an expression Ethan could not decode. Part bemusement, part disappointment, and strangely, part recognition. Because in that single absurd moment, Beckham had been transported back 2 decades. He remembered a locker room at Old Trafford in Manchester, the walls damp with steam and tension after a bitter defeat. He remembered Sir Alex Ferguson, his legendary coach, raging at the team. And he remembered the fateful second when a stray boot, kicked in frustration, had struck him square in the face. The tabloids had called it the flying boot incident. It had left Beckham with a cut near his eye and the world buzzing with gossip. It also marked the beginning of a fracture in his relationship with Ferguson, a wound that never fully healed. At the time, Beckham had been furious, humiliated. How could a mentor, a father figure, treat him so? For weeks, he carried the sting, both physical and emotional. But as years passed, as he matured, he realized the truth. It wasn't malice. It wasn't some premeditated act of violence. It was anger, heat of the moment, human imperfection. Sir Alex had been a man consumed by passion for the game, and Beckham had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Looking back, Beckham regretted letting that incident cast such a long shadow. And now, here was Ethan, a boy no older than Beckham had been when his temper had first cost him dearly, standing frozen after launching a sneaker in rage. Beckham saw himself, not the polished global star, not the composed businessman, but the young man whose own emotions had once betrayed him. So Beckham did the unthinkable. He smiled. He picked up the sneaker, dusted it off, and with deliberate calm walked toward the field. Parents parted nervously as he moved. Kids craned their necks. Ethan's teammates whispered frantically, "He's dead. He's so dead." Beckham stopped in front of Ethan, who was trembling, eyes wide, lips pressed together as if bracing for the end of his soccer dreams. The sneaker dangled in Beckham's hand. The silence was heavy enough to crush a pin. Then Beckham bent down slightly, held out the sneaker, and said in a voice that carried no anger, only quiet gravity, "Careful, son. Sometimes it's not the shoe that leaves the scar, it's the anger behind it." Ethan blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. The crowd erupted into murmurs. Beckham placed the sneaker gently in Ethan's hands, gave him a pat on the shoulder, and returned to his spot on the bench. The game resumed, though the electricity of the moment lingered like static in the air. Ethan slipped his sneaker back on, his limbs heavy, his mind racing. Every step after that felt different. Every glance toward the sideline found Beckham's calm eyes watching, not judging but expecting something more. When the final whistle blew and Ethan's team lost by a narrow margin, the boy didn't storm off. He didn't throw his jersey. Instead, he sat quietly, staring at his shoes, replaying Beckham's words over and over. For the first time, his anger had no outlet. For the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was another way to be. As the sun dipped low and families packed up their chairs, Beckham rose and left without fanfare. He didn't wave, didn't pose for selfies, didn't bask in recognition. He simply disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind a boy with a sneaker, a bruise of shame, and a seed of change planted deep within. And Ethan, watching him go, felt something he couldn't name, part humiliation, part awe, part strange hope. He didn't know then that the man he had struck with his anger would soon become his quietest, most profound teacher. All he knew was that the world felt heavier, and for the first time he wanted to learn how to carry it. Sunday mornings in Los Angeles have a rhythm of their own. The city, notorious for its sprawl and relentless traffic, feels almost gentle before noon. Street vendors set up their stalls, families wander to church or brunch, and in the neighborhoods where immigrant families have carved out communities, soccer fields once again fill with the sounds of whistles, cheers, and thumping feet. A week had passed since the sneaker incident, and though the world at large had no idea what had happened in that dusty community park, for Ethan it felt like a scar etched on his chest. He replayed the moment in his mind over and over, the shoe leaving his hand, the stunned silence, Beckham's calm gaze. He could still hear the words ringing in his ears. It's not the shoe that leaves the scar, it's the anger behind it. At first, Ethan had tried to brush it off. He joked with his friends, pretended he didn't care. It's just some dude, he told himself. Whatever. People make mistakes. But when the whispers spread, when kids in school started saying, "You threw a shoe at Beckham, man," the joke didn't feel funny anymore. Teachers raised eyebrows, his coach sighed heavily, and his parents gave him that mixture of disappointment and worry unique to parents who don't know what to say. What cut deepest, though, wasn't embarrassment. There was confusion. Why hadn't Beckham reacted the way everyone expected? Why hadn't he yelled, demanded an apology, or called for punishment? Why, instead, had he looked at Ethan like he understood? Ethan didn't know it yet, but Beckham had decided to return. The following Saturday, the tournament resumed. The park looked the same. folding chairs, the smell of grilled hot dogs, kids juggling balls while waiting for their games. But as Ethan stepped onto the field, heart already racing, he caught sight of a familiar figure sitting near the chain-link fence. Jeans, t-shirt, baseball cap pulled low, but there was no mistaking him. David Beckham was back. Ethan's stomach dropped. He tried to ignore it, focusing on warm-ups, but his eyes kept flicking toward the sideline. Beckham sat quietly, hands clasped, expression unreadable. No entourage, no cameras, no luxury SUV. Just him, blending into the crowd like any other parent. But the weight of his presence was undeniable. The whistle blew. The game began. Ethan, as always, took command of the ball quickly. His speed, his touch, his vision, they were sharper than most kids his age. The crowd gasped when he darted past defenders, roared when he launched shots toward goal. But along with the brilliance came the flaws. Selfish runs, frustrated gestures at teammates, a refusal to pass when someone else was open. By halftime, his team was trailing. Ethan stormed off the field, muttering curses under his breath. He kicked at the dirt, ripped open his water bottle, and ignored the coach's attempts to give instructions. His teammates sat in silence, used to this ritual of anger. Then from the sideline, Beckham stood. He didn't stride dramatically into the huddle, didn't announce himself. He simply walked over, crouched down at the edge, and spoke in a low voice, meant only for Ethan. "You remind me of myself," Beckham said softly. Ethan snapped his head up, startled. Beckham continued, his accent unmistakable yet his words gentle. "When I was your age, I thought the world revolved around my boots. I thought if I didn't shine, no one else mattered. But soccer, football, doesn't care about one star. It only cares about the team." Ethan clenched his jaw, bristling. "I'm the best player here," he shot back. "If I don't do it, nobody will." Beckham didn't flinch. "That's what I used to think too. But the truth is, the ball doesn't stay at your feet forever. Sooner or later, you need people. And if they don't trust you, you'll lose more than games. You'll lose them." The boy looked away, heat rising in his cheeks. He hated how the words pierced through him, how they sounded like something his coach or parents might say, but different, because they came from Beckham. The whistle blew again. Second half. Ethan jogged back out, the weight of Beckham's words heavier than his cleats. He tried, in flashes, to be different. One quick pass here, one moment of restraint there. But old habits died hard. When the final whistle came, his team had lost again. He collapsed onto the grass, sweat soaking his shirt, chest heaving. His teammates trudged off silently. Beckham remained in his seat. For a moment, Ethan considered storming away. But something held him. Slowly, nervously, he approached the sideline. Beckham looked up, his eyes steady, waiting. "Why do you care?" Ethan asked, voice trembling. "Why are you even here?" Beckham studied him for a long moment before answering. "Because I see more than the anger. I see a kid who loves the game so much, he lets it eat him alive. And I've been there. I know what it costs." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Beckham leaned closer, his voice low. "I once lost control in a World Cup. I let my anger decide for me, and it cost my team everything. An entire country hated me for years. And I thought I'd never escape it. But I learned. I grew. And I swore if I ever saw a kid walking the same path, I'd try to stop him before it's too late." Ethan blinked, stunned. He had seen highlights of Beckham's free kicks, the glamorous life, the fame. But he hadn't known about the shame, the hatred, the scars. Beckham stood, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You don't have to answer me now. Just think about it. Every time you lace up those shoes, ask yourself, are you playing for yourself or for something bigger?" And with that, he walked away. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm. Ethan played, Beckham appeared. Sometimes he said nothing, only watched. Sometimes he offered a few words after the match. Simple, sharp, unforgettable. Anger makes you predictable. Respect is stronger than talent. Your teammates don't need a hero. They need a brother. Ethan resisted at first. He rolled his eyes, muttered under his breath, tried to pretend he didn't care. But slowly, cracks appeared in his armor. He passed more often. He encouraged a teammate after a mistake. He held back from yelling at the referee. Small changes, almost invisible, but changes nonetheless. And always when he glanced at the sideline, Beckham was there. Not clapping, not cheering, just watching with those calm, knowing eyes. One afternoon, after another hard-fought game, Ethan found Beckham waiting near the exit. The crowd had thinned, the sun dipped low, casting the field in golden light. Beckham leaned against the fence, arms crossed as if he'd been there for hours. "You played better today," Beckham said. Ethan scuffed his shoe in the dirt. "We still lost." Losing isn't the worst thing, Beckham replied. Losing yourself is. Ethan looked up, frustration bubbling. Why do you keep saying stuff like that? It's just soccer. Beckham's gaze softened. No, it's never just soccer. Out here you learn who you are. And if you don't control it, it controls you. The boy fell silent, the words settling heavy in his chest. For the first time, he didn't argue. That night, Ethan lay awake staring at the ceiling. He thought about his teammates' faces when he screamed at them. He thought about his coach shaking his head. He thought about Beckham's calm voice, the weight of someone who had lived through storms he couldn't imagine. And for the first time in his young life, Ethan wondered if maybe being the best player wasn't enough. Maybe, just maybe, he had to learn how to be something more. Los Angeles wore a different face in the early mornings. The sun hadn't yet burned off the marine layer drifting inland from the Pacific, leaving the streets wrapped in a soft haze. Strip malls sat silent, basketball courts empty, taco stands still closed from the night before. For Ethan, though, Saturday mornings now carried a new meaning. They weren't just about games, about sweat and cheers, about proving himself. They had become something else entirely, because David Beckham had asked him to meet not at the field, but at the community center. Ethan showed up uncertain, his soccer bag slung over his shoulder, still wearing the defiance of a kid who wasn't sure what he had agreed to. Beckham waited by the entrance, dressed simply in a white t-shirt and jeans, his cap pulled low. To anyone passing, he looked like an ordinary man. To Ethan, he was a riddle, world famous, and yet here in his neighborhood with him. "Morning," Beckham said, his voice calm. Ethan mumbled a greeting. "Come on, let's take a walk." The two of them walked through the streets, Beckham keeping his pace slow so Ethan didn't feel rushed. They passed by small shops where owners were just pulling up shutters, a laundromat buzzing to life, a bakery filling the air with warm bread. Beckham stopped in front of a mural painted on the side of an old building. Children of every race, chasing a soccer ball that seemed to glow. "You know why I brought you here?" Beckham asked. Ethan shrugged. "Because this game," Beckham gestured at the ball, "belongs to everyone. Not just the best players. Not just the ones who win trophies. Everyone. And it's up to us to keep it that way." Ethan looked at the mural, the colors bright against the gray wall. He thought of how angry he'd been when teammates didn't pass, how furious when referees missed calls. He had never thought about what the game meant to others who never even made it onto the field. Beckham's tour continued. Their next stop was a small park tucked between apartment buildings, where volunteers in neon vests were picking up trash and repainting the faded lines of the soccer field. Beckham grabbed a rake without ceremony, nodding for Ethan to do the same. At first, Ethan resisted. "Why should I clean? I'm not the one who trashed it." Beckham didn't argue. He simply started working, pulling weeds, scraping gum off the bleachers. Slowly, Ethan followed. Hours passed. Sweat beaded on his forehead, dirt stained his hands. When they finished, the field looked alive again. Lines crisp, grass cleared, benches shining. Beckham clapped his hands together, satisfied. "See that? Sometimes the biggest victories don't come with goals. They come with giving people a place to play." Ethan stared at the field, chest tight with a feeling he couldn't name. For the first time, he understood that soccer wasn't just about him, about his talent, about being the star. It was about everyone who stepped onto the grass. The following week, Beckham took Ethan to a children's hospital. The boy felt uneasy as soon as he walked through the automatic doors, the sterile smell, the soft beeping of machines, the quiet shuffle of nurses' shoes. Beckham led him into a room where half a dozen kids sat in wheelchairs, their bodies frail but their eyes shining. A volunteer rolled in a cart with a soccer ball, deflated slightly so it wouldn't bounce too wildly indoors. Beckham picked it up, spinning it on his finger. The kids laughed, clapping their hands. He passed the ball gently to one little boy who had lost his hair to chemotherapy. The boy tapped it back with the side of his foot, grinning. "Go on," Beckham said, motioning to Ethan. Awkwardly, Ethan joined the circle, passing the ball softly, watching the children giggle with each touch. At first he felt strange, he was used to fast passes, sharp shots, competition. But here, every tap of the ball was a celebration, every smile a victory. When they left, Ethan was quiet. Beckham didn't press. After a long silence, the boy whispered, "They were so happy. Even though they're sick." Beckham nodded. Happiness isn't about winning games. It's about sharing the game. Over the next several weeks, Ethan's world expanded. He followed Beckham to food banks, where they stacked cans and handed out meals. He joined pickup games in immigrant neighborhoods, where kids played barefoot on cracked asphalt, laughing as if they were in the World Cup final. He stood in community meetings where parents begged for funding to keep youth programs alive. And through it all, Beckham never lectured. He just showed, lived, acted. And Ethan, almost without realizing, changed. On the field, his teammates noticed first. The boy who once demanded every pass now clapped when others scored. The one who once screamed at referees now shrugged off bad calls. The one who once stormed off after losses now stayed behind to shake hands. His coach, long weary of his tantrums, started nodding with quiet pride. His parents too saw the difference. Less slammed doors, more conversations at dinner. But the real turning point came one late afternoon. Ethan had just finished practice when he saw Beckham waiting at the fence again. He jogged over, a new confidence in his stride. "Why are you doing this for me?" Ethan asked. Beckham studied him, then said, "Because someone once gave me a chance to be more than my anger. And I almost lost it. I don't want you to make the same mistakes." Ethan frowned. "What mistakes?" Beckham took a deep breath. "When I was younger, in the World Cup, I got angry. One kick, one bad decision, and I was sent off. My country lost. For years, people blamed me. They hated me. I let my temper write my story. And later, with my coach, Sir Alex, things got worse. A shoe thrown in anger, and I carried that scar on my face and in my heart. I know what it feels like to let rage rule you. I don't want that for you." Ethan stared, stunned. He had heard the stories in fragments, the gossip of adults, but hearing it from Beckham himself gave it a new weight. "I'm sorry," Ethan murmured. Beckham placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't be sorry for me. Just learn from it. Forgive yourself when you make mistakes, but don't let anger own you. You're better than that." For the first time, Ethan felt tears burn his eyes. He blinked them away, nodding silently. Summer turned into fall. Ethan played in more tournaments, each time showing more maturity, more teamwork. Parents on the sidelines whispered about how much he'd grown. Coaches shook their heads, marveling at the transformation. And Beckham remained, sometimes in the crowd, sometimes waiting outside, always guiding quietly. One evening, after a particularly grueling match where Ethan had assisted rather than scored the winning goal, Beckham walked up to him. "You proud of yourself?" Beckham asked. Ethan hesitated. "I didn't score." Beckham smiled. "But your team won. That's what matters." Ethan looked down, then back up, his voice firm. "I think I finally get it." Beckham's smile deepened. "Good. Because the real test isn't on the field. It's out there," he said, pointing toward the city skyline, glowing against the dusk. Ethan followed his gaze, the weight of those words settling in his chest. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of what came next. The night air in New York had a different weight to it than Los Angeles. Ethan noticed at the moment he stepped off the bus with his teammates, carrying his cleats slung over his shoulder, his hoodie zipped up tight against the autumn chill. The city felt alive in a way he had never experienced before. The skyscrapers glowing against the night sky, the constant rumble of traffic, the chatter of voices in a dozen languages. This wasn't just another youth tournament. This was the youth tournament, the one scouts whispered about, the one that could change the trajectory of a boy's life. And for Ethan, it was the culmination of months of transformation, months spent under the quiet, steady presence of David Beckham. The boys checked into a modest hotel near Queens, where families crammed into rooms and ordered pizza boxes that stacked high on bedside tables. Coaches ran last-minute tactical meetings, warning them of opponents from Chicago, Miami, Dallas. Teams hardened by street ball and polished by academies. Ethan listened, nodding, but his mind wandered to Beckham's words. The real test isn't on the field. It's out there. Still, when he laced his boots the next morning and walked onto Randall's Island with the Manhattan skyline in the distance, he felt the old fire flicker inside him. The grass was crisp, the lines freshly painted, and the bleachers filled with parents, scouts, and strangers leaning forward with folded arms. Ethan had grown, yes, but could he hold on to that growth when the stakes were higher than ever? Their first match was against a team from Miami, kids fast and flashy, their dribbling drawing ooze from the crowd. Ethan found himself pressing harder, running longer, but instead of demanding the ball, he started directing traffic. "Switch left," he shouted, waving to a teammate. "Drop back, I've got him." His coach raised his eyebrows from the sideline. This wasn't the Ethan he knew 6 months ago. They won 2-1. Ethan didn't score. He didn't even register an assist. But he was everywhere, breaking up plays, encouraging teammates, chasing every lost cause. As they huddled after the whistle, sweaty and smiling, his coach pulled him aside. "That's leadership," he said simply. The next 2 games went the same way. Ethan's name wasn't in the scoring column, but his fingerprints were on every victory. By the time they reached the semi-final, whispers had started. Parents from other teams nudged one another, pointing at him. "That kid," one scout murmured, "he plays like he's already 5 years older." The semi-final against Dallas tested everything. They went down early 1-0 after a defensive lapse. Old Ethan would have screamed at his backline, thrown his arms up, sulked. This Ethan clapped his hands instead. "Heads up, we'll get it back." His words carried, steadying teammates who glanced at him nervously. In the second half, Ethan picked off a pass near midfield and darted forward. He had space, the goal beckoning, the crowd roaring. He could have gone alone, taken the shot, tried to be the hero. But he saw Luis, his teammate, sprinting into a better position. Without hesitation, Ethan slid the ball across. Luis buried it. Tie game. Minutes later, another chance came. This time Ethan did shoot, but the ball pinged off the crossbar. He dropped his head for a moment, then forced a grin, sprinting back into position. "Next one's in," he shouted. It was not by him, but by their striker, after Ethan's perfectly weighted through ball. They won 2-1. As the whistle blew, Ethan found himself grinning so wide his cheeks hurt. The old Ethan would have been furious, 2 games in a row without a goal. But this Ethan raised Luis's arm in the air, shouting, "This guy won it for us." The team lifted Luis on their shoulders, and Ethan felt no jealousy, only pride. The final drew a larger crowd. Local papers had hyped the matchup. Scouts leaned against the fences, clipboards ready. Parents from every team still in town filled the bleachers. Beckham, dressed in a dark jacket and baseball cap, slipped quietly into the crowd. He hadn't told Ethan he would be here, but Ethan felt him anyway, like a steady heartbeat in the distance. The opponent was from Chicago, bigger, stronger, their reputation built on relentless pressing and hard tackles. From the first whistle, the game was a battle. Ethan was shoved, tripped, elbowed. Old Ethan would have lashed out, barked at the ref, maybe even thrown a kick. Instead, he picked himself up each time, dusted off, and urged his team on. "Keep calm," he told them. "Play smart. We've been here before." The game ended 1-1, dragging into penalties. The air grew thick with tension as boys lined up at midfield, arms linked, eyes wide. One by one, penalties were taken. One by one, goals went in. Until the 5th round. Ethan stepped forward. The ball felt heavy in his hands as he placed it on the spot. The goalkeeper loomed large, arms outstretched, bouncing on the line. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. He remembered the hospital kids, their laughter with every soft pass. He remembered the park they had cleaned, the mural of children chasing the glowing ball. He remembered Beckham's scar, the story of Sir Alex's shoe, the pain of letting anger rule a life. And he remembered Beckham's words, "The real test isn't on the field. It's out there." But right now, this was the test. He took a deep breath, ran up, and struck cleanly. The ball sailed low and true, kissing the inside of the post before nestling in the net. Goal. The stadium erupted. His teammates piled onto him, screaming, laughing, tears in their eyes. They were champions. Later, when the medals were handed out and photos snapped, Ethan slipped away from the group. Near the edge of the bleachers, Beckham waited. Ethan jogged over, still breathless, metal clinking against his chest. "You saw?" Ethan asked. Beckham nodded. "I saw. I scored," Ethan said almost sheepishly. "But it wasn't about the goal." "Not really." Beckham's eyes softened. "Exactly." Ethan held up the medal. "This is nice. But I think I know now what you meant. This isn't the real trophy." Beckham tilted his head. "And what is?" Ethan's voice steadied. "Being someone my team can count on. Being better than I was yesterday. Learning not to let anger win." He paused. "That's the real trophy." Beckham smiled, a deep, proud smile that reached his eyes. "Then you've already won the only one that matters." They stood there a moment, the noise of celebration echoing behind them, the city skyline blazing ahead. Beckham placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, giving it a firm squeeze. "Remember this feeling," Beckham said. "Carry it, because life will test you again. Out there off the field. And if you hold on to what you've learned, you'll never lose." Ethan nodded, the weight of the moment settling into his bones. For the first time in his life, he felt not like a boy chasing glory, but like a young man beginning to understand what truly mattered. And as they walked back toward the lights, Beckham knew the circle had closed. From the day a shoe had once scarred his own face to this night when a boy chose humility over anger, the story had come full. The past had been redeemed, not by goals or fame, but by passing on a lesson that would ripple far beyond the field.